Hello, welcome and a very good evening. And tonight we will have this thing here on the table. This is a Roland MT-32, what do they call it, multi-timbre sound module. It's basically one of the best Midi synths or synthesizers that you can get for playing DOS games from the 80s and early to mid 90s. It has a very specific sound. We already had it once, I think, on this channel with the LAPCI definitely and the SC55, which are all related and share similar properties. But this is basically the original. It was pushed a lot by Sierra. They brought in support for this in around 1988 or something like that. It came out, I think, in the mid 80s, maybe 85, 86, 87, something like that. It comes with a standard array of Midi input and outputs, power supply and stereo outputs. And that's more or less it. It has this nice little display where games can show some information. For example, Sierra games and Lucasfilm games will print something here at the beginning of the game. And it has some controls like a volume knob and some sound thingies that you can turn on and off some channels and do some stuff. You can make music with it. In fact, I have already two of these, and this is not mine. This is from a person on the DOSReloaded forum who had problems getting this to run. It seems to be bricked, but we will take it to bits and try to uncover what's wrong with it, and maybe we can make it work. But first we have to figure out what's wrong. There is one more device back here, an MT-32 that actually does work. We can use it for parts, or at least to swap out something like ROM chips to see if those are broken or something. But I want to leave it working as it is. But this one has a pretty beat up case. This case here is actually pretty neat. However, it has some weird screws here at the bottom. That's probably how someone mounted the PCB in here. I don't think this is standard. So I would say let's open up this thing, take it to bits, measure the voltages and see if there's something fishy or iffy with this. But I think this is not standard. The rest of the case looks pretty clean. It's not beat up like this. My other thing back here also has mounting holes for rack mounting because it was actually used by a musician. So that's fair enough. Yeah, but let's take it apart. Let's power it on and see what it does. Take a multimeter, take the oscilloscope if necessary. Let's take the schematics of the whole thing and see, yeah, where the power should be, what the signal should look like. Maybe we can make it work. I hope we can make it work. All right, so here's the machine. Interesting, there's, well, serial number is 859572, I think. Probably, I don't know. Let's look inside. There are two revisions of the main board. I think the later one is probably more common, maybe. This one also looks more new, but I can't tell from the outside. Some people maybe can, but I'm not sure where the differences are. We will take out these 4 screws, also these at the front for the front panel, and then see where we go from there. So there we go, we're inside, and this seems to be not probably one of the earlier ones because I see date codes from 1987 on all the chips. Here is the Intel microcontroller 1895 it says. I think this is an 8050 compatible MCU with integrated PROM probably. Flashed with the firmware, I guess, of this machine. I think, not sure. All the usual chips here. I think these are probably all ROM chips, the Roland marked ones. There's also this Boss chip, and there's the LA32, which is the heart of the machine, which does all the synthesis. Here is the 7805 voltage regulator, and this will be the very first place to check, basically, to see if the voltages are coming in correctly. And I think there are more screws here. I leave the front panel in for now, but we might want to take it out. So first thing will be powering it on and measuring some stuff. I'm not sure about this construction. It might be that this first edition came with these things. There seem to be screw posts below these screws, and that's what we see on the bottom side as well. So that might actually be standard. These should be optocouplers, I think. No, these should be the optocouplers over here for the Midi interface. This here, I don't know. Would have to look it up. There's some glue logic and there's some RAM here. Some actual RAM, which is nice. Yeah. So what can we test? We can test the voltages. We can see if there's any clock and any data activity or address activity on the microcontroller. Also, we can test the same for the ROM chips. And yeah, I guess we should work from there. And there's also one thing that I already see here is a broken connector to the front panel. Yeah, that doesn't look too good. So that's already pretty bad. But it might just be plugged in there. So I'm not sure. It's like a very cheap, very weird connector here. I can plug it back in, I guess. But it seems pretty fishy. A very weird connector here. I think this looks different on my revision. I think I only have the later revision of the whole assembly. It says also here assembly number 79377310001. Yeah, I will fetch the schematics, I will plug in the power, and then we're measuring. So, okay, we're ready to go. This is plugged in, these weird leads are plugged in. Power is plugged in, let's press it. And I see a backlight, but I don't see anything happening on the display, which is not great. But we can, I think, at least measure something, hopefully. Let's try and ground ourselves. And I see 8.25 volts coming in. And I see 5.8 going out. I wonder if that's a bit high. That seems to me not quite optimal, to be honest. 5.9. So let's turn this off. Anything getting warm? Not super warm. Yeah, I'm gonna check if this should be actually 5 volts. I would assume it would be 5 volts, but this is no device, so who knows what might come in there. Okay, I have schematics here from the main board and a very tiny schematic here, which I am watching in much greater resolution on the screen. So sorry that you can't follow there. Maybe I'll do a cut in during post-editing when I find something interesting to show. Anyway, I'm gonna look for any test point here where I can check what the actual voltage here is. But I already see that in theory there's an 7805 there that should provide the plus 5 volt rail, and the 9 volts come in via the power supply. So plus 5 it should be, which means I would say that this might be a bit wonky. I'm gonna fetch my other MT-32 and double check what its value here is saying. So this is my other MT-32, which is working. It actually has very similar date codes, so probably both are later revisions, I guess, because they are more common. Again, I'm not pretty sure. This is the only board revision I've ever seen. My second one also has the same revision. However, this one, as I said, turns on, and as you can see on the multimeter, if I ground myself and measure here, I get 4.91 volts, which is fine for the 7805. Maybe a little bit on the low side, but I think 4.9 is actually pretty okay and decent. So whatever that is, yeah, here's also the very flimsy connectors, and we need to check how to plug that in correctly. They're pretty fragile. I mean, in the end, we could just solder them to the pads if nothing else works. Buy a different connector, maybe with 5 pins or 6 pins, I think this is. Yeah, but first, what I want to do is I want to unscrew this because it's not even soldered in. Or maybe, I think I have to, yeah, I'm wondering if I can just power it from this one here. But I think that's probably not possible. So I will swap the voltage regulator, because that we can easily order online for cheap. Or any of the replacements that turns 9 volts into 5 volts. That should be easy enough. So that's what we're gonna do. Maybe that fixes already something, because maybe some chips do crazy things when they go slightly over voltage. I hope nothing was killed. But yeah, only one way to find out, I guess. Well, I had to take the whole PCB out, more or less, because the screw here was really tightened up pretty well, and I needed to use this to keep the lug nut in place and then twist. But the screw itself was really a little bit damaged during the process, so I hope I have a replacement. Anyway, yeah, we got that out. One thing I can do is perhaps to see if my component tester actually recognizes this thing. This is the broken one, or the presumably broken one. Let's see if this thing sees anything here. No, it just sees a resistor, so it can't identify the 7805. Okay, so this is the bad one, more or less, and this is the supposedly good one. So yeah, let's test it. They're both Mitsubishi brand, but are they actually this old? Are the date codes 76 and 79? Well, then it's no wonder that one of them gave out, and probably I should buy replacement ones which are newer. Okay, I'm a little bit scared, but yeah, we got the functioning voltage regulator in. All these weird wires here are in place, I hope. Let's turn it on and see. And nothing still. So let's take our... nothing getting hot to the touch right now. Let's see what the voltage regulator says. I'm wondering if I can put it somewhere where you can see it. Well, I probably just have to read it for you. So ground is here, and then let's read it. It's 4.91, which is definitely better, but still not a great thing. I see nothing on the display at all. What we could do is at least see if anything is coming out of this machine. I could put a MIDI signal in there and see if something comes out. If that's the case, that would be nice. We could also then, if nothing happens, test if the clocks are there, etc. So we'll start the oscilloscope up and so on. Yeah, for sure, the voltage regulator was iffy. My fear is that it took something on the board with it by not outputting the correct voltage. Yeah, if that's the case, it might be hopeless, more or less. Maybe you could salvage this and put a like a Pi 32 in there, which is an MT-32 Pi-based emulator. But we're not giving hope yet, right? We will be trying to see if we can revive this thing. Maybe there's something simple that we can fix, or at least let's say something that we can still buy. The ROM chips will be tough. Maybe they can be replaced by standard EEPROMs. The MCU might be possible, but something like the LA32 chip or these BOSS chips, I think, yeah, you can forget about that. That's proprietary. And if those are gone, I think the whole machine is more or less dead. So before doing anything fancy, I thought I might do one experiment. Because the user who owns this told me that he saw the Midi message flash on power up, which is the same that we saw. So what I did now was to hook up a Midi cable from my 486 down here using the PC Midi card from Keropi, which is great. It's an intelligent mode, supports all the games and stuff. Hooked it up, hooked something to the line out, put that into my capture setup over on the iMac on the left, which I'll show you in a second. And yeah, the main display doesn't work, but the Midi message flashed, so perhaps this helps. And I'm gonna try and twist this as carefully as I can, which is not very. So you see my machine over there, and let's listen. So that's actually pretty clear cut. The device works, which is great. I think the voltage regulator might have been a problem. I ordered a bunch of replacement voltage regulators on eBay. I replaced this on this one here and on my other two machines just to be on the safe side, to give them longer lease of life, basically. The question now is, what is wrong here? It could be the, I'm gonna power this off to be safe. It could be the cables here, which are very wonky. I could simply solder them to the board. I'm not quite sure I'm happy about that. I could do that and undo that pretty easily, I think. I also heard that the controller on this display thingy might be a problem, so I need to remove the front panel and have a look. I could simply, for example, swap out the front panel for the one that I have in my backup machine, and I need to figure out if there's a replacement or something. If that's the case, then this would be a pretty simple solution, I would say. I mean, the main board works, so I guess it must be something here or with the cable. So yeah, I think I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna swap out the front assembly, and then we'll see on what's what. So this is the presumably broken display in my functioning MT-32. I mean, both are functioning, but in the one that did everything. And as you can see, it's still dead. It doesn't show anything. I used these DuPont connectors to get a better connection because I actually understood how the connectors down here work, and they work by friction, and you push down on the white thingy to actually release the cable again, which is pretty clever and pretty cheap, and you can just use these very, very cheap flex cables. But nowadays I would use something rather like these cables or something, because you have a much better connection, it's much easier, or use one of the Molex connectors, stuff like that. But as you can see, it seems to be really dead. You can only see shadows of something here. So I guess this thing is totally dead. The question is, does my display work on the other MT-32, or is there something on the main board also broken? I googled, and these things are hard to come by, or possibly not at all, but there is a replacement in the form of a regular HD style LCD display, I think they're called, from Hitachi, and there's a small RT Mega board that can adapt it to this wiring and stuff. So maybe we'll have to build that. Yeah, but let's first check if my display actually works in the other MT-32. So I took another look at the presumably dead display, and while doing that I noticed a couple of things. First of all, this ribbon cable had one severed connection, which was obviously hampering things, and already said that I dislike these types of flex cables and these connectors. So what I did was to install some regular pin headers and used some of these DuPont connector cables to temporarily attach this to the headers here. I will replace that in a moment with this usual pin headers and all female wires, which I can then just run between those two posts. But for now, let's have a look at this formerly dead display. Let's turn it on, and there you go. It still works. It was just these flaky connectors that didn't work or were broken. So there you have it. I don't think this display got a lot of love. There are scorch marks here from the soldering and things like that. But I am pretty sure we can salvage the whole device. So now I got this formerly broken display, will put it in my spare MT-32, and it will work just fine. So let's desolder this stuff here, put in the new sockets, and connect everything back up together and close the whole thing up. Okay, so the pin headers have been soldered. I think this looks much nicer and cleaner than these old things. And this looks also much sturdier, and it's actually pretty, yeah, it attaches pretty well. Let's hope that there's enough space in here, but I think so. So I'm gonna wire this up, and then we're gonna close it up. And later we can also use something to clean off all this gunk here. As I said, this thing here was used by a musician, probably was taken on tour in a rack or something. At least there are rack mount holes at the sides of the case. So I think this thing has seen some action, but that's okay. It tells a story basically. But yeah, let's put it back together. So off we go with this now again working MT-32. I think, yeah, maybe even if this thing didn't work in the beginning, it was most probably due to the 47805, because 6 volts is probably way too much. Probably not bad enough that this device has gotten any serious damage. I hope it will work for another many years, maybe even decades. Yeah, this is a very simple piece to replace. Actually, you don't even have to solder, because Roland simply used a socket and a screw and nothing was soldered there, so that's fine. The deal with the display was a bit more weird because, well, the way they mounted this is pretty bad. This got also a bit mistreated, I think, during its lifetime. Who knows how that happened, but the fix was also easy enough. And furthermore, my spare one now has a better cabling for the display, which is a good thing. And I can replace the voltage regulators in my MT-32s as well, which is probably a good thing, because a dying 7805 that goes above 5 volts is probably not a good thing to have. So yeah, this is some preventative maintenance that costs almost nothing and helps a lot. But for today, I think that's it. Please share, like and subscribe. That would help greatly this channel. If you, especially the sharing, for example, because I think people don't do that quite that much. But if you post it on your social networks, I would really like to see that, and it gives me quite a bunch of views. This is still my hobby, as I said before, and yeah, this basically one video pays like a few euros maybe, but I can buy some solder or some other stuff from that and basically subsidize my hobby. So if you want to support me due to that, I would greatly appreciate that. There's also Patreon, Ko-Fi and PayPal down in the video description, but I am not even asking for a lot of money here. But if you can spend a few cents, that would be appreciated too. If not, that's fine. Leave a comment and I hope to see you next time. So, bye!